So the stage that I'm at now with the painting is I have my underpainting done. So this is basically the groundwork now set. And I wouldn't be able to tell you how many sessions I have left, but I'm going to be moving in the next video into what I would think of as the main body of the work, all right? But before I do that, I thought I might pause and do a little bit of what I'd call a self-critique. Now, this is something that I do when I have all the groundwork done. And the purpose of it is to examine problems that are coming up and solve them. And the problem solving part of painting is the fun part, I think. So you don't necessarily hate it when problems come up. So we're going to have a look at some of the issues that come up, okay? Just to have a look at the painting and talk about some of the issues that have come up already, even in the groundwork stage. If you notice the tree on the left of the painting, the very straight tree that is in the sort of middle grouping of trees, you've got the dark tree with all the ivy on it, and then you've got this tree to the left of it. That created a problem for me because with the bright colour, it was taking some of the focus off the tree that I wanted, that I was calling the main pillar of the composition, okay? And I have to do something to interrupt that tree, either put the branch across it that was there already that I wasn't happy with, or foliage, or change the colour, or do something. And quite often when you're doing this kind of problem solving with the painting, you're deviating from what's there in front of you. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit now because it's an important topic. All right, so I've been working from photographs and drawings, okay? I had a tonal drawing, I had a colour study, and I had some photos to work from. And in fact, videos as well, because I took video footage. Why didn't I just work from photos? I briefly touched on this in another video, but didn't really explain it. It has to do with the idea of your perception, right? And some people use just photos very, very successfully. There's a painter on YouTube I really like, a fellow called James Michael Smith, I think his name is, and he works, as far as I can see, exclusively from photographs and very successfully. But he gets a different kind of an effect from what I get, and I don't want to cheapen the thing by calling it an effect, because every artist, it's like a fingerprint, every artist has their own look to a painting, and the look of your painting doesn't even settle down to a particular style over the course of your career as an artist. It has to do with meeting the needs of that particular painting, what your original perception of the thing was, and the gap between that and what happens when you physically put paint on canvas. So there is a little gap there, and you're always working within that gap between the so-called reality of the thing, which might be represented by a photograph, for example, or a sketch for that matter, and your perception of the thing, and then also what happens to it once you paint, which is something different again. And it can be a difficult point to understand when you're beginning to paint, because what we do when we start painting, and some artists get stuck on this very much, and it holds them back. So here's a top tip coming up. Do not paint the idea of the thing. A tree, you could paint the idea of a tree, what you know to be true about a tree. It's going to have a main bough, it's going to have branches coming out of it, it might have leaves depending on the time of year. These are things we know about a tree. but they don't have a lot to do with our perception of a tree. And if we can get rid of our big ideas about how things should look, we progress as painters because we're only dealing with what we see in front of us. Once we're dealing with what we see in front of us, we're then looking at aids like photographs to help us and sketches. So what's the difference between a photograph and a sketch, and why do I not paint exclusively from photographs like a lot of people do? Now, I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with painting exclusively from a photograph, but I have found in my personal experience that I can't get the amount of information that I want just from a photograph. So this is why I go out and I do sketches and colour studies. My perception of what I'm looking at has to do with me, how I see things. It doesn't have to do with how the camera sees things. And I'm forever coming home with photographs that are not a heck of a lot of use to me, even as a memory aid, because they're so different from what my perception of the scene was. And this applies to any sort of painting that I do, still lives or portraits or landscape. I'm always running into this problem. And so for me personally, I want to go with not just getting something looking photographically right, but having a painting that shows what my perception of what was going on was. My I don't want to say my thoughts about it, because you're quite often trying to leave thinking in terms of deciding what a thing should look like. You're trying to leave that kind of thinking behind. You're doing analytic thinking, yeah, and you're doing a lot of feeling as well about something, but you're not going with the shoulds about what a tree should look like, for example. So I hope that makes some kind of sense. But I did want to talk about that because I see it again and again, people working with their idea of what things should look like and then forcing the thing to conform to that idea, and it tends to make for a poor painting. I don't mean necessarily people who are working from photographs. Working from a photograph is actually a step up from that when you think about it. Because when you think about little kids painting humans, right? Paint your family, you know, and they paint their family. They've got a perceptual idea of, you know, what a human looks like, which is based on reality, but it's a blueprint, isn't it? Which isn't specific to a certain thing or a certain experience. So just the other point, the having self-critiques, these are something that when you get to the main stage of a painting, when you're at this stage that I'm at now, and you still have a lot of work to do on the painting, but you've got your groundwork done, that is a very good time for self-critique of a painting. And the purpose of the self-critique is to analyze what kind of problems you're running into, what you're not really happy with, what's not sitting right on the canvas, or where you're trying to go to. Are you starting to get there already? Because you should be starting to see something progressing in the direction that you had intended to go. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you had the finished painting perfectly in your mind what it's going to look like, because painting is an exploratory process, because it's a manual thing that it's, you know, coming from your brain to your hand, and you're using materials and tools to do it. Something different is going to have to happen in that space between your imagination and the execution of it. And you should be very open to that. That's what helps make a good painting. You're not trying to force the thing down a particular route. Because when you think about it, what's the point? What's the point in doing that? It should be an enjoyable exploratory process. Okay, so in the next part, hopefully hopefully I'll be further along in the main part of the painting, and I'll see you then.